Hello, everyone. I'm Dylan Tweeney, the editor-in-chief of VentureBeat. I'm here with Ruth Reeder.
Hello.
Ruth is a talented reporter in our New York office. And this week, we're going to be talking to yet another VentureBeat person, John Koetsier, who's heading up VentureBeat's new research product known as VB Insight. We'll talk to him about what that research is and what they're learning about marketing technology, which is what they're focusing on initially. And it'll be a pretty interesting conversation, I think. But first, let's get some tech news highlights from VentureBeat.com. I want to start with Google and this low-cost Project Fi wireless service. Like suddenly, Google is a wireless carrier. You can get Google service for your phone. They announced this last week. But I think this is kind of a big deal, Ruth.
It's a huge deal. Also, we saw this coming. I mean, they've been moving towards this.
True.
They're looking to replace the carriers or at least make them sweat. But I think Google's been angling in this direction for a while. And so now their service is here. And it's something like $20 a month for service. And I think it's $10 for every gigabyte of data that you use.
Yeah. There's some minimum there, so I think you pay like $30 and you get 3 gigs to start or something like that. But that's a pretty darn good rate.
Yeah. So basically, it's $30, which is insane because that trumps everything. Like, I would love to pay $30 a month.
Yes.
I think I pay over $100. I think that's insane.
Yes.
And we're the only country that even has these sort of ridiculous prices.
Yes. It's interesting, Google in typical form is not making this like a complete carrier. While it's available in many cities, it's only available if you have a Nexus 6 phone. And I'm out of luck because I have a Nexus 5. I'm so sad.
I don't have an Android at all. Oh, wait, now I do, but it's not the Nexus 6.
So unfortunately, you won't be able to use this on Google Fi.
Right. What's interesting to me about Google Fi is that it's not its own network entirely. It's, they're hinging it on Sprint and T-Mobile's networks.
Yeah, and Wi-Fi heavily. Like the phones will primarily use Wi-Fi if it's available. And then if it's not available, it'll switch over to Sprint and T-Mobile. And Google's basically just renting space on those networks, which is a pretty common practice for certain kinds of carriers.
Sure, but it's definitely an interesting way to go. The whole project is very interesting. I
can't wait to see what happens. I suspect that, we had an op-ed that ran a couple days ago about how Project Fi could be the beginning of the end for Verizon and AT&T. And I think that's actually a little overblown. It puts pressure on the carriers. I think that's as far as Google really wants to go. I don't think it actually wants to be a carrier. Mm-hmm. Much like what it's doing with its high-speed fiber in Kansas City and a couple other selected cities. It's like, we're going to show you how to do it. I think that's what Google is doing.
Totally. And the same thing with Loon, too.
Well, Loon is a little different because in that case, they're trying to create a technology with these high-altitude balloons that'll get internet in places where the carriers won't even go because it's not worth it.
But isn't the goal ultimately to be everywhere?
Really? I thought Loon was just to go over Africa and places where there aren't many people and the people don't have much money to pay for internet service anyway.
Yeah, no, I know that's certainly true. But I thought, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I thought that the eventual goal was just sort of like internet everywhere, sort of like same idea as internet.org, but a different
Oh, all right. Well, I could be wrong. Then in that case, we may all be getting our internet and our search and our ads and our information and our news from Google at some point in the future.
Google's going to rule our lives.
Oh, my God. Let's jump ahead to another story. Facebook's secret plan to kill Google, which is an incredibly popular op-ed that ran on our site this week. The author is Armando Biondi from Ad Espresso. And the argument is that Facebook is actually doing really, really well in mobile and in video and in delivering news, and that over time, that those are actually the areas where the future lies, where the growth is going to be, and that Armando, the author, thinks that Facebook could actually overtake Google in terms of market share and indeed valuation and become $1 trillion company.
So does he think that in terms of just advertising and sort of like where eyes are, or does he mean like everything?
No, I think it would have to be advertising primarily, because that's where both companies make the vast majority of their money. But the idea is like, if for the last 10 years or so, Google was sort of the go-to website. It was like the starting point, right? In the old days, there were companies like AOL and Yahoo built these portals, right? And they thought that would be like, everyone would live in these portals. But actually, it turned out to be Google, because whatever you want on the internet, you go to Google first, right? Mm-hmm. I think Armando's argument is that you're going to live in Facebook instead. And you won't search so much as just wait for things to come to you. Like, oh, here's an interesting news story. Or, oh, here's an offer for a pair of pants that you might consider buying. Or if you do search, maybe you'll do it within Facebook. I don't know. But his point is that Facebook has so nailed the social, mobile, video angles that it has a shot at becoming what he calls the second trillion-dollar company in the future. And he's getting ahead of himself because there are no trillion-dollar companies yet. But he assumes that Apple will be the first.
Well, it is really interesting. The other thing that they've done is just really been fantastic about their acquisitions and their product rollouts, honestly. I mean, there's various data on like Facebook's use waning among certain populations and growing among others, and like, is it still as cool as it used to be? Do people want it? And I hear that argument, but at the same time, you see things like even just like the launch of Messenger, for example, like separating it out from Facebook.
Well, it seemed crazy to me, but in retrospect, it's a genius move.
It's a genius move, and people love it.
Yeah.
They use it all the time. I think the majority of, at least my friends, tend towards Messenger. I don't particularly. I use whatever, my friends are using. I have way too many apps on my phone. Let's just we'll leave it at that. So
but you're not brand loyal. But if your friends are on Messenger, you'll use it, it sounds like.
And I notice that they tend towards it. And I think that that's really interesting. And so like besides those rollouts, you've also got like Instagram and WhatsApp, which are hugely popular.
Right. The clincher for me is I think Facebook is a company that has made no serious mistakes yet, ever. They've just executed flawlessly. I mean, they've made some mistakes in terms of communicating privacy changes and things like that. But they haven't made any serious strategic mistakes ever. Whereas Google is they've made a number of big mistakes. Like the most recent big one is Google Plus, I think. That's been more or less a complete flop.
Failure, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also seems like Google experiments more. And so I think it's like an interesting strategy. You see that with you go one or the other, right? Look at Amazon. They test out new stuff and kill it all the time.
Right.
Different model, obviously, but you know what I'm saying. That's a strategy.
It may be that Facebook's strategy has worked well over the past few years, but if conditions change, maybe Google will rise to the top again. I don't know.
Who knows?
You mentioned Amazon. Let's talk about Amazon Web Services. A few days ago, Amazon broke out revenues for its cloud service, Amazon Web Services, for the first time. It's been very vague about it for as long as AWS has existed, but now it has revealed that it generated over $5 billion in revenue last year, which is
just
huge.
A big deal.
Yeah, it's really huge.
Major deal, and everyone freaked out. I covered their earnings that day, and they had like a crazy spike in like stock, and then it all leveled out and everything. But like people were very, very excited. It's really Amazon's first sign of like continued source of potential profit. I don't even want to say it's struggled with it for a long time because I don't think that, Jeff Bezos cares.
He said, in fact, again and again, that he's not concerned about profit. He keeps margins super thin because he wants to become dominant and remain dominant.
It's all about reinvesting for him.
Right.
But I think from an investor standpoint, AWS seems like it could give the company a bit more stability.
Yes.
And everybody is feeling very happy about that.
Yeah. Unless you're another cloud service provider, you're probably not feeling very happy.
That's the other crazy thing is their offerings, price-wise, are cutthroat. Like earlier this year, I want to say they came out with a $59 for like unlimited cloud storage.
Wow.
And
yes, that's right.
That's a crazy deal when you look at some of the competitors in the space, like Box, Dropbox, others. They're willing to like sort of like just slash.
Yes. Sometimes people think of the Silicon Valley giants, Facebook and Google, but discount Amazon. And, Amazon has its fingers in a lot of different pies.
And I was using them as an example for like people that experiment. I mean, they are totally willing to like launch and close and beta launch and maybe launch to something else. Like they are no problem experimenting with new products and just seeing how they go. I mean, look at this whole drone thing, which is like kind of a crazy pursuit, but like may work out in the end. Who's to say?
Yeah. And then Amazon could be delivering, diapers or potato chips or who knows what.
Lunch snacks.
Snacks, exactly. That's the one thing that you don't want to get up from your desk to go get, right?
You need a drone.
Drone, bring me some lunch.
Exactly.
Let's go talk to our guest, John. But first, I'm going to give you a little message from our sponsor. The What to Think podcast is brought to you from the San Francisco headquarters of New Relic, which hosts us in their lovely studio here, but also sponsors the podcast. More than 250,000 people leverage New Relic's comprehensive cloud-based solution to analyze more than 690 billion data points per day, and I'm sure it's more now. That's an old figure. Across more than 4 million application instances. You can learn more at newrelic.com. And now let's welcome our guest, John Koetsier. He's the VP of Research for VentureBeat's. So in a way, we're kind of interviewing ourselves today. So John is building the research team for VentureBeat, which we call VB Insight. And before that, he started out at VentureBeat as a writer for us doing journalism. But before that, he was a product manager, a marketing manager. You've done a whole bunch of stuff, John. We're kind of lucky to have you. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
VB Insight is kind of a new thing for a lot of our listeners and for a lot of VentureBeat readers. And, we're not just going to sit here and hype our own thing, but tell us what this research business is and how this kind of fits into VentureBeat so that we have some context.
Sure. I'll be really brief and just cut me off ruthlessly when I start preaching too much.
I do. I used to edit you, so I have no compunction about that.
And how painful was it? VB's been around for a long time, right? We've been doing news for 5-6 years. We added events and conferences probably 4 or 5 years ago as well. And we're adding research right now. We're trying to do something different. We're trying to do something that's really data-driven. And so far, it's going really, really well. And there's some really interesting things and lots of challenges that we're trying to overcome.
You're talking about market research like, what a Gartner or a Forrester or an IDC would do, right?
Sure. I mean, in some cases, and we've talked to some of the analysts who have done some of the reports for some of the names that you've just mentioned, they're creating research based on talking to 10 vendors and 3, hand-selected customers of each of those vendors. And we want to get a lot more data and a lot more insight than that.
Where do you get all that data?
Well, part of it is right on the very site that you're an editor of. We have a large tech audience, obviously, so we want to talk to practitioners, people who are doing stuff daily.
Right.
And we want to know what they know. That's one part of it. Other part of it is we're trying to get what we call big data, ecosystem level data, and we use a lot of partners for that. People like Orb Intelligence, people like Datanyze, a lot of different companies there who are really super helpful with providing some of the big ecosystem-wide data that we're looking for.
So when you talk about our audience, that's 7 million roughly people every month encounter VentureBeat in some form on our website or things like this podcast or on Flipboard. How do you turn those readers into data that you can use?
If you've got experience and you're a reader on, let's say, social media marketing, which is one of the reports we'll be talking about, then in a news piece about social media marketing, you might include a little reefer and say, hey, we're doing a survey. If you help us out, we'll give you the raw data. They jump over there, they fill out the survey. We clean the data afterwards, of course, but for some surveys, like CRO survey, we did a conversion optimization one, we've had 3,000 respondents, which is unprecedented.
Wow. Okay. And you compare that to something that the other research firms do where they're interviewing a couple dozen CEOs or something, right?
In some cases, yes.
Your focus, at least initially, in terms of the area that you're doing research in, is marketing technology.
Right. When you're starting out, you don't want to do everything everywhere, right? We'll just try and boil the ocean and fail miserably everywhere we try. So we want to try and own a space, a category. We chose MarTech. It's exploding. We're tracking 2,400 companies in the sector. 3-4 years ago, there was maybe 100, right? So this thing is just exploding. Last year, there's $45 billion worth of funding events in MarTech. In the past quarter, we saw about $5 billion. There's still a lot going on in the space, and we want to be in a noisy, confusing, complex, what the heck is going on here space, because there we can be helpful.
Of your 2,400 companies, are we talking about people who are companies that are really getting into loyalty right now and finding ways to push marketing in sort of the mobile space, or what sort of companies are you following?
Well, if you look at Scott Brinker's Chief MarTech overview landscape, he's got about 40 different categories, and we're looking in probably about 20 of those that we've identified as some of the areas that we can actually compete in.
That includes Chief MarTech thing, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that Chief MarTech thing is sort of one of those big maps that has hundreds of different logos spread across a bunch of different boxes, right?
Yes, it's one of those shock and awe infograms, right? So we're trying to focus in a couple areas. Some of them would be mobile marketing, some of them would be mobile advertising, marketing automation would be one, social media would be another, a couple spaces like that.
I don't want you to give away all your insights, but I'd be really curious to know sort of some of the trends you're seeing. I mean, if the market is exploding this much, there's got to be some key things you've noticed in the last year.
Well, it's really interesting. One of our recent hires, John Cifuentes, who joined us from Altimeter, did a report that we launched 2 weeks ago or so on marketing tech investment and finance and everything. One of the interesting things there in the first quarter, analytics doubled the next category in terms of actual investment into marketing tech categories. So essentially what we're seeing is that marketers have 5 million data sources rushing into them every day with omni-channel, with mobile, with social, with their website, with their app, and don't forget, there's also offline. There is our actual real world that we walk around in sometimes and occasionally buy something in.
I think that's like that thing that I see between home and work. Yeah.
Exactly. And they're trying to figure all this out, and they need help. They can't do it. You need machine learning. You need automated technologies. You need analytics to boil down data into knowledge, into insight, into actionable things. So massive amount of investment right there.
What was the number you said in terms of the total funding raise? It was like $5 billion or something like that into...
Yes, and I totally lied. I just double-checked right now, and it was actually $3.5 billion or so in the first quarter of this year.
And that's just in marketing technology companies.
Precisely.
This is sort of a pointed question. With $3.5 billion going into this sector in one quarter, 2,100 companies, like, they can't all be good, right? There's got to be some bullshit in there, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not asking you to name names necessarily, although maybe we should get into that. But to me, that's one of the interesting things, because I think technologists often look at marketing technology and think, oh God, here come the marketers, right? And the language around some of these things and the amount of money and the number of companies, that kind of confirms that suspicion, right?
There's a couple things going on there. A, you're not wrong. As in any sector, with many, many startups, a lot of those are going to fail and fall because they don't achieve product market fit, or they suck, or whatever else, right? But B, the challenge that brands, companies, real marketers have today is with this many choices out there, they could spend their marketing budget, in fact, their entire company's budget, about 20 times over just on this little marketing tool for that. They could optimize everything down to the nth degree where they're doing nothing but checking stats and doing automated. That's the challenge, right? What are the 5, 7, 13 tools or tool areas that you need to focus on? Buy great technologies that fit your space, fit your model, fit your company's ability to pay, fit your company's ability to implement and actually use, and will actually generate more revenue than you're sending out the door to pay for these things.
Okay, so it's not all BS. In other words, there are definitely companies in there that are, if you adopt them, if you use this technology, if you sign on to this particular SaaS analytics platform, it will deliver some return on investment for you, but you've got to find the right one.
No question about it. Even if there's a very good platform that works very, very well, something might be enterprise focused, and your startup or your small company is going to be just overwhelmed because you don't have a team of 10 people on your marketing team. Conversely, there's a little startup that, they do something really small, really amazingly, and they just cannot serve, a larger company that has a bigger need.
I have a specific question for you about one of these tools. I'm very curious about beacons. Beacons and marketing, I think mobile marketers that I've spoken with are like really about it. Because, basically if you set up a beacon in a retail store, it can ping passerby on the street with like deals and discounts, or just say like, come in, or whatever. It also provides like an extra layer of tracking. So you can also like sort of get information about those customers as they're like passing by, or like where are they going after, depending on where these beacons are located and like how big the network is. So my question is, on the one hand, I get it as a marketing tool. On the other hand, that seems like, from a consumer perspective, to be one of the most annoying things I have ever heard of in my entire life. Like I would be so personally irritated if every time I passed by a store, or even a handful of stores, they pinged me with something. But maybe that's just me. I don't know, because the way that marketers pitch it, they're like, people love coupons. And I know that people love coupons, but I just would love a reality check on that.
I was talking to a mobile executive just recently about beacons, and he was saying, there's a lot that needs to be fixed here. We're still unbelievably early in the adoption of this thing. So first of all, you might want the message, but if you don't have the right app installed, if you haven't set up the right permissions, you won't get it. There's challenges just making this magical technology actually work, as we even worry about the privacy and annoyance implications of it. Assuming you actually make it work there, then This guy was telling me, I'm always getting pinged as I walk by this same place that there's coffee here. Well, I walk there every freaking day. I don't need the notification. I know. There's a lot more intelligence that needs to go into these things. Another case that's quite common is you're on your way out and then you get the notification and it's too late, right? There are some amazing and cool things that can happen. You can walk into a store and get extra information on products, whatever that might be. You can enter a geo-fenced area, and by the way, there's a deal on a cafe, mocha, cappuccino, whatever the heck, coffee that Starbucks has just come up with that costs $10 and everybody hip is drinking. But it's really, really early. Only some of the installs are really successful, and there's a lot of work to be done to make it useful and something that I want.
Let me ask you about something that's a little less nascent. You guys just came out with a report on social media management tools. To underscore the level of data and research that goes into this, I'm just reading off the summary. You surveyed over 1,100 social media managers. You analyzed 250,000 tweets sent by 1,600 top brands. You combed through vendor websites. You scored and ranked 28 tools across 5 key indicators. As a journalist, this kind of research is actually very welcome to me because I can't get data like this by interviewing people. You've collected an enormous amount of data. And what kind of patterns are you finding about social media managers? These are things like Hootsuite, right? And Social Flow, which have been around for years now. Is this a mature category, or is it something that's still developing?
As we started looking in the area, as we're starting to think about where we're going to do a report, what are we going to look at? Social media has been there. It's been done. What are we even looking at this for? And the reality is that it's still a space that is early. When there's 28 major tools and 200 tools that we could have looked at, there's still a lot of development, a lot of innovation happening there, and a lot of interesting things going on there. I mean, really interesting for us when we look at this and we sort of contextualize it among all the other research we're doing, say marketing clouds or other things like that, is when we look at people who have bought, let's say, Adobe Marketing Cloud. And more people who have bought Adobe Marketing Cloud are using Hootsuite than are using Adobe Social. We see interesting things where, in spite of this necessary and needed trend towards consolidation in tools, because there's so much out there with the 2,100 tools, there's also a strong desire for marketers to choose best-in-breed tools, or the tool that they're most comfortable with, or the tool that works best for their narrow set of circumstances, regardless of what other big marketing cloud or other suites they might have access to.
A marketing cloud is, can you define it for us briefly? That's like a suite of marketing tools?
In your dream world, or the marketer's dream world, everything that I ever want to do in marketing is encased in this one black box called a marketing cloud.
And the big players there are Adobe and Salesforce. And
Adobe is almost certainly the biggest player in that space by revenue and by customers. Salesforce has a very significant solution there. Marketo, even though it started as a standalone marketing automation tool, has expanded and grown beyond that and has a very, very successful tool there. Oracle, which we are shocked about when we looked at this, I'm going to just lay my cards on the table here and bare my soul and confess my sins. A lot of the innovations happening with the new and the young and the upstart and the growth companies and everything like that. And when we look at some of the old companies, maybe in Oracle, we consider a little bit old, an HP or an IBM. We put our opposite of our rosy-colored glasses on. We think, can they really have something amazing? Oracle had an amazing solution here in Marketing Clouds. Very, very interesting, very well done. I can go on and on this stuff, so you better stop me.
Okay. No, that gives me a good flavor. So, I mean, then the question, like Oracle, obviously, Adobe for that matter, these are big acquirers, right? With that much venture capital in the market and all these investors looking for exits, 2,400 companies across, all the different categories of marketing automation, and big acquirers like Oracle and Adobe out there, or IBM or Salesforce, who have big war chests and they want to build these comprehensive marketing clouds. There's going to be some consolidation, isn't there?
Massive consolidation across all categories in MarTech. The challenge really is, and this is where we see one of the key fights, is between these consolidators who are grabbing this chunk off the shelf and that chunk out of there and this chunk out of here and sort of mashing it together in a big snowball and putting it on a plate and saying, boom, there's your marketing cloud, go use it. And part of it is green and some is purple and some is orange and it all kind of smells yellow or whatever, right? Does it work for you? Does it consistent? Does it all talk to the same database? Does it have the same user experience and user interface throughout, etc.? That's sort of one space. There's others that are saying, no, that's not the way to go. We actually want to build this one holistic, true, beautiful, amazing thing in the Apple-esque sort of vertically, horizontally, and all other ways integrated manner, where everything works the same and you always know what you're doing, right? There's another camp that's saying, you know what, we're actually going to make this sort of platform and everything can kind of plug in and connect and talk. So there's a common core, but there's many different options. So there's lots of different ways people are approaching this space.
It sounds like a whole lot is going to happen in the next couple of years, and that you might be in a very good position to watch some of that transformation, growth, and consolidation.
Absolutely. We're excited to see it. We're excited to expand out of MarTech and go into other exciting and interesting spaces, but there's still lots of room for us to grow here.
What's the reaction been? Are people like, thank God you're doing this? Or have the MarTech vendors been like, don't shine that light on us?
There's a lot of different reactions, from who the hell are you and why are you reporting on this, because we're just an upstart, we're a startup division, There's also the response that we've gotten from some vendors and a lot of end users. Holy mother, this is amazing. I have not seen this before, which is awesome. And all the things in between. We're just, maybe starting to be about a year old, although the first half year was like me, first employee and only guy. So,
yes.
And we just hired a bit of a team and added to it recently. So we've got a long ways to go to get to the level that we want to be at.
You're off to a great start. It's really interesting stuff. And like I said, I'm just blown away by the scope of the data that you guys are bringing to bear in your reports. So I'm sure our readers will be hearing a lot more from you, and I'm looking forward to incorporating a lot of that data into the stuff that we do on the VentureBeat News team as well, when that makes sense.
Wonderful. Really appreciate you having me here. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for coming, John. We'll see you around the office. And thank you for joining us for What to Think, VentureBeat's technology news podcast. As always, you can find us online at venturebeat.com. And if you haven't subscribed to our podcast on iTunes yet, just look for What to Think and you can subscribe there. We'll catch you next week on What to Think.